we're excited to talk about the future of food. South by Southwest is a conference that gets hosted in Austin every year, and they had a panel on what the future of food looked like. And I went and I did some research and I looked at what they were talking about in the future of food, and it looked a lot different than I think what this group of people is going to talk about what the future of food looks like. So we're very excited to talk about regenerative agriculture today. And again, we are the Meat Mafia, and we are going to be asking these wonderful people a bunch of great questions. So.
And just to take it from there, so Harry and I, we co-host the Meat Mafia podcast. So we're local to Austin. We've done about 170 episodes in the last year. And really our thesis of the podcast is we're just trying to figure out how we can help make people healthier. So what we've both found is that cooking our own meals, gravitating towards really good quality proteins, fats, and then the last pivotal piece is connecting with our local farmers and ranchers and choosing to buy from brands that support regenerative. That's been some of the biggest impact that we've had on our own personal health journey. The cool part about this panel is that every single panelist that we have up here have all been guests on our show and have taught us so much about the food system. So we curated some questions that we think that you all will want to know the answers to that will really help you all. So if you want to know what regenerative agriculture is, if you want to know why grass-finished beef is more nutrient dense than grain-finished beef, how to find a local rancher, we're going to dig into all of that. But I think an amazing starting point would just be to go down the row and have our incredible panelists just tell us a little bit about yourself, your health journey, and your just connection to ranching and regen.
We are Weldon and Ann Warren. We're out of Lubbock, Texas. We do grass-finished beef, not grass-fed. That label has been bastardized by the USDA, so you can't trust what's in your grocery store. My granddad lived to be 96 years old and was never prescribed a single prescription. Lived off the farm, had his own animal proteins, his own garden, his own orchard, didn't spend much money on the healthcare system. My dad got an education in ag, thanks to my granddad, and he got indoctrinated by the grain-fed movement, faster, cheaper, but yet not nearly as high quality. So he then, all of us kids, our health just deteriorated. It just fell off a cliff. He had 2 sextuplet bypasses within 10 years in his 70s. My mom had 15 to 18 TIAs, transient ischemic strokes, a heart attack, 2 major strokes, 2 stents in her carotids. And then I'm right behind them, having eaten all the grain-fed, being the youngest of the 4 kids, and had a stroke at 70, at 45. During the 9/11, I was a money manager, so it was stress and cardiovascular issues. I had 50% blockage in my carotids and roughly 50% in the 6 arteries of the heart. And how did my doctor answer the question, could food have anything to do with this?
He said no. He said, but don't worry, we'll manage your decline. And our children were very, very young, like kindergarten age. We had 4 children. Still have 4 children. But when he said, we'll just manage your decline, I didn't know what to do. Went home. Weldon stayed in the hospital another couple nights. But God was working on him. He had already had Weldon reading about pasture-finished beef. There weren't very many regenerative farmers or pasture-finished beef people in Texas. And so he moved us out of the city, out to the farm. I'm so thankful he did. I loved raising my children that way. I loved becoming a regenerative farmer and rancher. So anyways, you'll hear our story as we continue.
So my name is Philip Meese. I'm the creator of the Carnivore Bar. I was a combat medic. I served in Afghanistan and got absolutely wrecked by terrible food and antibiotics. So on my healing journey, regenerative agriculture played a huge part. Grass finished. Beef just has this completely different, biological profile. Different fatty acids. It has more stearic acid. Has more omega-3, conjugated linoleic acid. It's all of those, nutrient elements as well as the protein quality are just completely sacrificed when you go with commodity beef. And so, as I'm like turning over every rock and trying to find what has gotten me so terribly sick, regenerative agriculture played a huge role in that. I met my rancher, met my meat, went to the actual place that they're raised, and saw the conditions. And it was a transformative experience to just be in touch with my food and to reclaim my health. And so as I was getting better and on this carnivore diet that has helped me so very much, I'm still not done on my journey. But I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could take this healing modality, this healing nutritious food, and turn it into a shelf-stable product to be a meat MRE, so I could send it to soldiers who are, God knows where, but can't change that. But I can provide healthy, nutritious food on the battlefield by providing them pemmican. So this is the food as a combat medic I wish I had when I was deployed in Afghanistan. This is what my soldiers really, truly needed. And these are the fine people who helped make that.
Amazing. Anthony, go next.
Hey there, I'm Anthony Gustin. I was very overweight and very sick when I was younger. Ironically, came from a family of farmers. So 7 generations back, as far as my family could tell, were farmers. And the entire family was very sick, very obese. The last thing I wanted to do is have anything to do with farming. So what I wanted to do is help everybody get healthy. Was really motivated by that. And the only way I knew how was to be a clinician. So sort of fast track to be a preventative clinician. Got my doctorate in chiropractic, master's in sports rehab, and had some clinics in San Francisco. Was working a lot with a ketogenic diet, seeing how much metabolic health issues there were, how much metabolic dysfunction, and what a great tool keto was. So started a company called Perfect Keto, and worked on that for the last 4 or 5 years, trying to help as many people obtain metabolic health as possible. And on this journey, I just kept searching and asking the question, why are people so unhealthy, and how can we dig deeper and find the roots of this? On top of that, I think that, what I'd love to talk about as well during this panel today is that I found so many other problems in society, this disconnection we have, and all of the problems that, people blame social media and these other things on. Climate change, nutrition, all these things, I think have a root, and that root is our food system. And I think that if we approach our food system in a proper way, we can return back to a little bit more wholeness, balance, harmony that we're missing. And so left Perfect Keto, got my own farm east of Austin here, 45 minutes away, and I've been tinkering around myself, trying to figure out what is it like to be a farmer. And that has now led into a various amount of other endeavors, the help of Anna Weldon here, of course, in this amazing community. So yeah, excited to share my unique perspective, being a clinician, entrepreneur, farmer, very amateur farmer.
Incredible. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is John Pantalone. I own and operate Amber Oaks Ranch, which is about 45 minutes northeast of here, with my lovely wife, Molly, of 32 years. We got into regenerative ranching really through a quest for independent living. We're living in a very affluent suburb outside of Dallas with young kids. It was apparent to me that type of a lifestyle wasn't conducive really to raising a family. Every moment of their life was kind of programmed with dance and karate, et cetera, et cetera. And so I really wanted to get back to a more natural, independent living, raising my own food. So we started a homestead south of Houston, and we did that for 10 years, raising a menagerie of different animals and learning how to process our own foods, learning how to can and garden, et cetera, et cetera. So when the kids graduated high school, we grew up in Central Texas. So we purchased 70 acres just outside of Taylor, Texas, and really started to implement on a larger scale what we had learned through the homesteading movement and period. So we learned there permaculture principles, which really is a design science around more sustainable lifestyle. And that really feeds into the regenerative practices that we implement on our ranch with rotational grazing, et cetera, et cetera. And so my desire really was to raise the best quality, best tasting meats. And so we raise beef, pork, chicken, and lamb. We sell that at the local farmers markets in Pflugerville, Hutto, Taylor, and Elgin. And really just connecting with our community and trying to impart to them the knowledge that we've learned about what good food tastes like, and share that with our community.
Hey, I'm Sam Moffett. My wife and I own Shirttail Creek Farm in Brenham, Texas. Yeah, our sort of journey to get to this point started in Austin. We lived here. I went to UT. My wife and I met working together in digital advertising. Had about a 15-year career doing that. And, while it was a good way to make a living, it was not very fulfilling for us. We were selling a product that was made of pixels, and at times I had questions as to whether or not I was adding any real value to the marketplace. And so we also had little kids, and when they were 1 and 3, an idea we've been talking about for a long time came to fruition. We wanted to raise the kids on a farm, and I still had my advertising business. We just bought the farm in Brenham. I grew up with horses. We were going to ride horses, and I don't know what we were going to do, just frolic in the fields or something. And I ended up there, and the ad business started softening, and I realized at one point I either needed to kind of revitalize that business or start something new. And I started looking around at all this land I had just bought and thinking, like, what can I do here? And I of course, went bonkers on YouTube, which is the only way I've been able to do this. I learned 99% of everything I'm doing now on YouTube. A couple books, but I don't have a short attention span. So, and we, bought a few hundred layers, laying hens. Gave my wife a small anxiety attack, and they started laying. And I came and told her I bought another 1,500. They're coming next week. And she said, "Who's going to collect all the eggs?" And I said, "Well, I got other things to do, so you're going to have to get out there." Anyway, fast forward, we're still married, and we've got about 6,000 laying hens, and we're butchering about 200 calves a year on our grass-fed, grass-finished beef program. We use managed intensive grazing for that. Very passionate about that process. In fact, my favorite part of our farm is just the process of growing grass and converting it into beef. So really, we're grass farmers at the core. Everything else we do complements that. So our laying hens rotate on the pastures. I can expound on that later. Our pigs rotate in different areas and add value, and same with our broiler chickens. But anyway, here we are 6 years later, and talking at KetoCon. So, hey.
Love it.
And Sam, hold on to that mic, because I'm going to come back down to you for our first question. But the breadth of wisdom on this panel is incredible. So we have 2 entrepreneurs who are supporting the regenerative agriculture movement, and then we have 4 regenerative farmers here, and they're all first-generation regenerative farmers. So that means that they dropped what they were doing before and got into farming. So a lot to talk about. The first question that we wanted to ask, regenerative, tongue twister. What does that mean?
You're asking me?
Yes.
The mic. Regenerative farming is a style of agriculture that mimics nature. The goal is to mimic healthy ecosystems. Monocrops don't exist in nature. In nature, multiple animal species graze and peck and root at the ground, and multiple plant species compete and also cycle nutrients together. So the systems we've put in place are meant to mimic that to the best of our ability. And what that does is it promotes a healthy soil microbiome, which I won't go off on the mycorrhizal fungi in the soil and everything, but a lot of the ground we're farming has been farmed for corn and cotton and overgrazed for a long time, especially out where I am. And so the systems we put in place are meant to leave the ground, the soil, and the overall environment in better shape than we found it. This is a more sustainable way to farm. It doesn't require outside inputs of chemicals to get a crop to grow. So at its core, that's how I would define regenerative.
Love it. John, you want to go next?
Well, there's not really a lot to add to that. I guess the only other thing, to simplify it, really regenerative is about healing, right? Healing the land, as Sam mentioned, as well as healing the human, which both body, mind, and spirit. And it's it's very intentional to practice animal husbandry in this manner, as Sam alluded to, right? But it's also not only better for the environment, but it's also better for the animals. Their health is improved. They're less dependent upon chemicals, antibiotics, vaccines, anti-wormers, et cetera. So some of the principles that Sam alluded to help break the parasite cycle in the animals, so you don't have to use as much chemicals or any at all if all goes well. And so the meat that you're getting is much healthier. It's not been bastardized by outside products, right? These other chemical inputs. And really that results in the people who consume it having a healthier existence as well. And that, like I said, it not only affects your body, that affects your mind and your spirit. Knowing that the animals are happy, that they're raised well, imparts a good sense of being in the individual. And again, the health benefits, I think, are apparent to everybody that's here. And most importantly, well, maybe not most importantly, but certainly a positive benefit of that is just great tasting food, right? And really that's what's driven me to this type of a practice.
The way I like to explain regenerative people who maybe don't have a concept on this is to think about the cost that it takes to produce your food. Most people don't think of what needs to be done to put the food in the grocery store that you buy or in a restaurant. And the vast majority of the food we get is extractive. It's net negative on the land. So we are taking resources from the land to put it in a package that goes on shelf that then goes into your body to nourish you. A sustainable system, if you think about this like a bank account, for example, extractive, you're spending more than you're earning. A sustainable system is you're spending the same amount you're earning. But in a regenerative system, you are stocking back up and you are creating a savings account that you're building up. We can't afford a sustainable solution right now. So even if we were very extractive, but if we started doing sustainable, if we're spending more than we're earning and we're sustaining that level, not good. And so what we need to do is we need to restore that bank account. We're in a massive amount of debt currently in our food system. And this is an important concept of understanding the cost of your food and what it took to bring that to your table. And I think with regenerative as a very greenwashed, very co-opted term, PepsiCo and General Mills, all these companies are now regenerative. And what is regenerative about it? I think that we're talking a lot today about food and land, but is the food and land regenerative if it comes at the expense of local economies? Is it regenerative if it comes at the expense of small farms because we're having to scale regenerative to big operations? And so I think that regenerative should be thought of as more of a holistic term of how we're participating in nature and our ecosystem. And I think at the heart of it, if we optimize for food and for land, local economies, and place-based sort of solutions, all the stuff, the health, the land, everything kind of comes as a downstream effect. So that's how I think about regenerative.
Well said.
Okay, I'll continue with the regenerative. We raise and sell grass-finished beef. On our place in Lynn County, we get the energy from the sun that helps photosynthesize and grow our plants. The cattle graze that forage, whatever it might be. It's always a multi-species. As someone mentioned earlier, we always like to have a live root in the ground. When we get rain, we have a zero runoff because the water penetrates where the roots are and goes into the soil, as opposed to our row crop neighbors who let the water just run off the end of the road, the rows into the road or the bar ditch and down to the closest lake, and then have to turn on their irrigation wells and water 18 inches per year for a row crop, let's say cotton. We probably irrigate about 5 to 6 inches in a year, and we grow a ton of beef to produce on that same acreage. We don't use any synthetic fertilizer. The cow provides that fertilizer for us in a sense of a compost. Our soil's getting richer every year. We have earthworms, just a variety of life out there. The favorite part of our regenerative part is that we have swallows by the thousands that do our pest control. They eat the flies. They eat everything that's out there flying that they're bigger. If they're bigger, they eat it. And so we have swallows on our circular, our pivot system, and we take videos of them all the time. There's thousands of these fly catchers, as we call them, but they're swallows. And then that fertilizer hits the ground from those birds, and it's just a big cycle. And that is our definition of regenerative farming.
So from a woman's viewpoint, regenerative farming is life-giving. It's life-sustaining. I love when Weldon talks about that the water actually gets absorbed. I mean, it rains so little in West Texas. Carrie knows that. I mean, so rain is such a precious commodity, and for it to just fall and run off and not help the soil is just a crime. There's something in our country called desertification of grazing land. And when animals aren't grazed properly or they're overgrazed, again, always driven by money, driven by how fast can we get these animals to market, the land gets very abused. And yet, at the same time, the best way to bring that land back to becoming a life-giving land is using animals and their hoof action as aerating. You can come by our booth later. I've got a great picture of a desertification right next to a regenerative farm. It's like there's just a fence line that divides the two completely different farming styles owned by two completely different people. So anyways, I think just from that female perspective, regenerative farming and ranching is just where the land is able to give back. John, you mentioned that, and it makes the beef taste better. It just makes any animal product, makes the chicken taste better, the pork taste better. So, and there really is a huge taste difference, and I think you'll be able to talk about that. So that's my view.
Yeah. So I did think of something to say. It's the regenerative agriculture is food that's nutritious. That's in a nutshell. And you should take some time to think about that. It's like, it's not just matter that you're stuffing in your face. Like you are a donut. You have an open hole from this end to that end, and everything goes through. But you only are getting, nourished by what you can absorb. It's what's bioavailable. And the debt Dr. Gustin was talking about, the desertification, it all goes back to soil. And so soil is where nutrients come from, no matter what you're growing, no matter what food you eat. The nutrients in that food come from healthy living soil with a living root, and that's the key to being self-sufficient and controlling your own destiny and your divine individuality. It's divine autonomy is like you need to know where your food is coming from and know that it is food. So one of the big things that I discovered when I was trying to health hack my way into something approximating a healthy life after coming out of the Army is that I felt way, way different when I was eating grass-finished beef. And so when I come to launch my product, I say, well, we're only doing grass-finished, and I want to force everyone to eat, my way. And I got really dogmatic, and it's like, there's zero carb, high fat, and it's like, we're never going to violate, there's going to only be one SKU. And I had to walk that back because a lot of people were like, well, eat the meat you can afford. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll throw them a ball. I won't be dogmatic. I'll use commodity beef. And so I go to dry this product, and I instantly lose 40%. So I'm drying grass-finished beef, and I'm drying commodity beef. And there's 60% yield. So it's just 40% water. So you buy $10 piece of meat, $4 are just lies. You're getting robbed. It's not meat at all. And so not only are you getting a lower quality meat, lower quality amino acids, but you're eating a stressed animal who's nutrient depleted, who's raised on nutrient depleted soils. And so it's not nutritious. And so then you combine that with the fatty acid profiles. I mean, this is KetoCon. We're talking about mitochondria and beta oxidation and oxidizing fat. Well, you can't shuttle the high fat into the mitochondria without L-carnitine, so ruminant agriculture. And you don't have the saturated fat. The stearic acid goes away when you finish cattle with grain. So there's no stearic acid. It's about 10%, and then 47% palmitic acid, that is saturated fat in both kinds of cattle. That does not change. But the omega-3 fatty acids, the PUFAs, the fragile vitamin, fat-soluble nutrition from the grass, that all goes away. Same with the stearic acid. And working with these two products is just night and day. So not only do I have this 40% water meat, it's like when I'm drying my product to make pemmican, it's like, well, the cost savings just got annihilated. I can't work with this. And it's not as flavorful. It's not as good for you. It doesn't have the right fatty acids. So it doesn't set up. It's like turning into mush. Because there's no stearic acid. That saturated fat helps it set up and be a bar. So ancestral communities would have never even considered wasting grain, which they can't cultivate with combines and modern technology, on cattle or any ruminants. But also it's inferior. It's inferior as a product, and it's inferior nutritionally. And I thought I'd just add that.
And I mean, I know for you did so much R&D and research and sourcing from different farms for the tallow, because that's such an important part to the carnivore bar. And it was the one farm with the grass-finished beef that was regenerative that really worked for the taste of the product as well, right?
Absolutely. It's it's an art. It's kind of like people who make wine talk about all these different notes and palates. Grass-finished beef is the same. It's very, very difficult to make it taste well, but it comes down to the genetics. And I'm sure these ranchers can tell you more about it. But for me, I just was like, nope, nope. Okay, cool. And so I went with Joyce Farms because they had a program that was big enough to accommodate me. And as I hope all of these regenerative ranches scale, we can get it more into the mainstream to get high quality nutrition into people's hands.
So well said. And it's so important to set the stage for what regenerative agriculture actually is, because I think it's a term that's gotten really popularized the last few years, but a lot of people might not necessarily know what goes into something being regenerative or grass finished or an animal actually being raised properly. So having you guys set the stage for that is massive. My follow-up question, I wanted to talk about regenerative and properly raised animals in the context of nutrition. So Philip, you perfectly led into my next question. I think you might have read my mind or something like that. But I think there's two stages of everyone's health journey. Like my stage was, I first kind of figured out what the right foods were that I should be eating and the right macronutrient profile to get my health and my stomach under control. So I went to my local grocery store. I shopped the outer aisle, the perimeter, where all the real food is, like I was told. And I would say that probably got me like 70 to 80% of the way there. But when I really got that next level boost in my health, it was when I sought out grass-finished farms that were regenerative, doing things the right way. We both noticed such a tangible benefit in our health. So for the audience in here that's maybe questioning, should I, is conventional okay, is regenerative, what should I be doing? Maybe we could talk through some of the nutritional benefits of sourcing properly raised beef and from regenerative sources.
Sure. Again, dovetails on kind of what I was saying earlier, but you're getting more meat per pound that you're actually paying for. So you're getting more of the branched chain amino acids in a bioavailable form that is ancestrally consistent with what our ancestors ate. Because these modern genetics are kind of cultivating this grain-finished approach, and it's kind of wiping out the nutrition and inflaming the beef by giving it non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. That's how you get the intramuscular marbling. And so it's profoundly unhealthy for the animal. You're getting all this inflammatory cascade to make it fatty. And so then they sell it by weight. So you're getting a triple threat there where it's waterlogged, it's fat, and it's inflamed, and it's not as nutritious. It's lower quality protein. So, no wonder your family got so sick. Yeah. It's like, so I feel a little bit like an imposter because I'm not a rancher, but I've dealt with the product and I know the difference it makes in my health, and I let down the customers who really wanted grain-fed, and a lot of them converted. So I'm very, very grateful for you all that you are making your voices heard, that you're voting with your dollar for regenerative agriculture, because I think it is the future of food, and it's very, very important we invest in it.
Definitely. So, a lot of people don't realize that it takes a very short time for once a ruminant starts to be fed grain, corn, soy, any grain. It only takes 90 days for that animal to lose roughly 80% of their nutritional value. When you eat grass-finished beef that was meant to be, that has been stayed on the pastures and its entire life, the way God intended it to be, like you said back in the day, they wouldn't have wasted grain on those animals. You end up with a 1 omega-3 to about 3 omega-6s. We've had our beef tested. That's where our beef falls. Anytime you can have a ratio of 1 omega-3 to 4 omega-6s within that range, you will eliminate a lot of autoimmune diseases. And when you finish cattle with grain, so there is, Weldon has already mentioned this, the grass-fed label, and we'll get into what really happened with that label in a little bit, but that label allows somebody to have their cattle in a pasture and finish them on grain. Those animals end up with 1 omega-3 to about 20 omega-6s. Once you start getting the omega-6s out of range, you're going to start getting plaque in your veins. And so if you take it right out of the feedlot where they don't have access to pasture, you're going to get 1 omega-3 to 50 omega-6s. It completely tips the scale, and then you bring in the low CLA, conjugated linoleic acid, and all the other things that Philip was mentioning. And when you buy grocery store beef, which you need to eat beef, there's something called good, better, best. Eating beef is good. Better is finding someone who at least keeps them on pasture, even though they're finished on grain. And best, of course, is grass finished. When you do that, you're just going to see horrific health results. And if it doesn't make you horrific health results, what you're missing is if you would pay the extra money for somebody who's either certified or carries that logo, or you meet the rancher and you know that they're finishing on grass, you're going to see exactly what Brett was talking about, just this jump. So Brett was so sick and he restored his health to 70% and thought, wow, this is amazing. I can't believe food did this to me. And then he met us and other people, and he started eating our beef and other people like Shirt Tail's beef. And he went from 70% to that 100%. And when I watch him walking around, and his posture is so amazing and his countenance is always shining, it's like this guy's on cloud 9. And you can see it, but he'll tell you that there was a jump between that 70% from eating good and better to eating the best, just pushed him up to where it's like, man, he is now starting this whole new company, which I'm so jazzed about. Anyways.
Thank you.
My better half. And it's more than 50%. So I'm just going to contrast really quickly a feedlot environment versus regenerative. If you've ever passed one, you've smelled them. And it's just such a stench that you have to feel sorry for the cattle that are in a feedlot. It's probably the most unhealthy environment, and it's really animal cruelty that we support that type of system by buying grocery store meat that's grain finished. If we'd quit validating the deception, if we would vote with our dollar, then that model would crash. And that's what we really need to do. It's unhealthy for the animal. If our cattle, we call them holy cow happy. They're out in the pasture. We've got thousands of photos and films, video of them. They're just grazing. The birds are on the back of the cattle. They're picking off the flies, if there are any flies out there. And then you go back to what the feedlot looks like. These cattle are sick, and they're on their way to death. 70% of the antibiotics sold in the United States are sold to the feedlots. That's 70% of the antibiotics are sold to the feedlots. If they don't give those cattle antibiotics in the feed that they're eating, which is all the starch, the carbohydrates, then they just die that much sooner. But if you, even without that, all the cattle in a feedlot will die over time if they're left there too long. There's been great research on that. How long can you feed a cow before it dies? And you're eating the meat in the grocery store shortly before that animal's going to die in the feedlot. And so it's just such an unhealthy system. And yet we've got all these regenerative farmers and ranchers that are providing you product to pull you out of that system so that we can be healthy, do keto, enjoy good healthy fat and good proteins for this carnivore bar, which I'm a big supporter of. And I don't eat a lot because I eat his carnivore bars. And that's what sustains me at this moment in time. So anyway, that's my part of the feedlot contrast and the USDA. Another quick note. Tom Vilsack is the head of USDA under Obama Biden. And of course, Biden brought him back because you always bring your crony friends back. And so he's back as the head of the USDA. He's the one that withdrew the grass-fed label that many of us were involved in right here at Whole Foods in Austin in getting that grass-fed label. Will Harris from White Oak Pastures in Georgia was here in Austin. We were here, and we got us a grass-fed label.
Back in 2005.
2005. And what did Tom Vilsack do in January of 2016? He withdrew the grass-fed label, and we have if you come to our booth, you'll see the word withdrawn on the legal document, and that's where he withdrew the grass-fed label and said, all cattle eat grass at some point in their life, therefore it's now legal to label any beef grass-fed, even right out of the feedlot. So if it doesn't have a certification, or you know your rancher really well, you shake his hand and you know their practices, it is probably grain finished, and it doesn't deserve your money. And another legal thing they did, the FDA allowed them, while they're killing these animals, hanging up the carcass, they're able to rehydrate the animal with what percentage of water? Roughly 10% tap water, municipal water, is added to your carcass weight, whereas when we are hanging our animals, we're going to dehydrate through dry aging, a process of dry aging. For about 2 weeks, we dehydrate about 7% of the water. We've done those tests. We've actually measured the weight difference, and it's about a 15% difference that you're paying at the grocery store, and you can see the water boil off as you brown the ground meat in a frying pan if it's grain finished. You're paying 15% more for water.
I think when looking at these categories of grain-fed, grass-fed, regenerative, and asking ourselves what's more nutritious, just to keep it very simple, I think you have to start by asking, how do we know something is nutritious? And we have effectively not upgraded our way to assess nutrition in the last 75 years. We look at the same vitamins, minerals. If you want to get down to fatty acids, amino acids, nothing has really changed. I had a PhD researcher from Utah State. I think you guys have had him on as well, Stefan Van Vliet,
Yes.
who is pioneering a new way to test what is in food to know the compounds that we're actually ingesting. He calls it the nutritional dark matter. So there's about 800 compounds that he's testing for, which allows him to sort of make a fingerprint of a food. Here's what we're actually getting when we eat this, beyond just the vitamin B, magnesium, things like this, the vitamins and minerals. And what he shows is that grain-fed, grass-fed, as they alluded to, and regenerative are completely different foods. If you look at them from the chemical composition of the foods, they are entirely different foods. And I think that this is just what we have now. We have no incentive to keep digging because we have enough understanding about nutrition from a data perspective to make sure people don't die from immediate sickness. The question I would pose after that is, how much more is there that we don't know about the food that we're consuming? So now we're having these 800 compounds. The panel here already said all the things that we do know. Zach Bush talks about often how there's microRNA, not from vaccines, but from just the regular transmission of information in an animal that then go into you that transmit information about the environment. And so this feedlot, if the animal that you're eating is raised in a feedlot, super stressed out, awful life, you are eating the information of that environment. It's pretty important thing. I don't want that information in my body, especially, large-scale poultry operations, pork operations, I think even worse than feedlot cattle. And so this is just the data. This is just the information that we can measure. And I think when you're actually trying to know something, we have sort of a loss of information at each stage. You have the observation, your experience as a human interacting with something. And then when you try to put that into language, you're losing quite a lot, because you have to describe it with words to communicate with somebody. Then when you reduce that language into numbers, graphs, and figures, you're now losing another huge batch of that. And even when you start ratcheting it back up and increasing that, there's some large companies, I won't name any names, that ship boxes of meat from international huge feedlot farms all around the US. And you look at their piece of meat next to a Holy Cow or Shirt Tail or Amber Oaks, this is a completely different food. I don't need anybody to tell me that one is more nutritious than the other. I just need to look at it. It is a completely different food. Then comes the taste and experience and all that. So I think that even when we're trying to reduce this stuff and we have more data now, we need to tap more into our intuitive sense of what makes me feel better, what intuitively looks better to eat. And I think that that's a part of our innate human wisdom that we've stripped out and handed to science and told us that, as long as it hits X or Y or Z number, we're good. I don't believe that to be the case.
It's amazing. So it sounds like that's a little bit of the genesis behind Rooted. Could you maybe just tell the audience a little bit about what you're doing at Rooted and what you're building?
Yeah, and nutrition's one part of it. Again, I think that so many of these things are solved when you keep food local. And if you have farmers that are connected to their actual consumers, you start fixing all of these problems that we're talking about, all the stuff that we're talking about, all the issues. If you know your farmer, if you know your rancher, you can shake their hand. It's sort of a proxy for all of the things that we come to these events for. Like, we're all on a journey to try to have the most amount of health, to have the best human experience. And I think that once you get to the point where you've made this a lifestyle shift and you're participating in eating food from your local environment, from people who love and care about their land, you're getting this transmission. You have better connection. The dollars are staying local. It fixes so many of these issues. And so we're trying to connect people locally. We're not shipping any meat. And even talking about, I think that a question coming up probably is, how do we scale regenerative? I don't think we should scale regenerative. I think that we should be able to replicate regenerative. I think we should have models that we can look at as examples, YouTube videos, and see how can we translate this for my ecosystem. My friend has a farm 5 miles away from mine, and it's completely different soil, completely different topography, completely different rainfall. It's storming at my place when it's not at his. How can we expect to scale something and look at it from that model? Everything, when you bring it down back to more of a local level and solve the issue of having to have people. I mean, I think Sam's a little bit of a unicorn here, where this guy is like an amazing distributor and marketer. He wears every single hat perfectly. Most farmers don't have the time to do that. They need to spend their time tending to the land and participating at that. And so how do we remove most of the middlemen and come up with this model where people can get access to their food source locally and meet their farm and know where their food's coming from without having to go through Whole Foods approval, stamp this label? How do we vet that and bring this stuff in a much easier way to consumers? I don't have any answers, but if we can't figure that out here in Austin, Texas, which we're launching in, we're sort of screwed in my mind. We need to figure it out. And then again, hopefully we can open source it and many people can do this in their own area. But yeah, it's obviously a lot of work to do here.
Well said.
So I can't expound any further on the chemistry behind the benefits of grass. But I did want to redirect the conversation a little bit over to chicken and pork. The same applies to lamb as beef, as their ruminants, but pork and chicken are monogastric animals. They can consume grain and convert that. But the difference with a pasture-raised pig or a chicken, again, you can see that in the biggest manifestation of that is in the chicken egg itself, right? It's going to be a much richer color, a much firmer yolk. The broiler chicken, your typical broiler factory farmed, as was alluded to before, thousands of birds inside of a very large building. They spend their entire life there living in their own manure. All right, and there's a lot of ammonia that comes off of that manure, and as a result, they have to feed them subtherapeutic antibiotics in the water. It will say on your package antibiotic free. However, that's just the last tiny period of their life where they're able to wean them off of that. How much of that residual antibiotics still exists? But beyond that, taking that bird and putting it out on grass, again, they're going to consume lots of bugs, lots of grass, lots of seed. I have a video on my Instagram just recently of a chicken running around with a field mouse. And so they get all of that in their diet, which translates to your diet, right? And so would you rather have a chicken that's been, breathing ammonia-rich air and fed subtherapeutic antibiotics to keep it alive, as well as help it gain weight, because they do that for financial reasons as well? Or would you rather have a chicken that's been raised out on grass, experiencing life as a chicken, and also you get the advantage of a much higher quality meat? Same thing for our pigs. Our pigs do actually eat grass. Again, you can check out our website and social media. Consuming lots of grass, they're getting lots of acorns. They're also getting lots of turtle eggs, snake eggs. They're eating lots of rodents. I've got some pictures of that as well. So this is, as Joel Salatin says, the pigness of the pig, right? And experiencing life as the animal's supposed to. And so God has given us these animals to sustain us. I think we ought to honor and respect their life, and then take advantage of that nutrient that exists out there, and if they're living a good, healthy life. Mm.
Yeah, I think at the core of what we're doing, one of the key principles of our style of farming and ranching is to let animals express their natural behaviors. Chickens are supposed to be outside on the pasture, like John said. Hormonally, chickens that are living in artificial lighting environments, high stress environments, those birds are, hormonally screwed up. The other thing I wanted to talk about, the same would be true, in the feedlot environment too, but, it's critical that we realize, this has already been said, that, the food that's coming out of conventional production systems and high stress, high density feedlot environments and pig and broiler barns is coming from animals that are metabolically unhealthy. I'm not a scientist, but eating meat from a sick animal is probably not the best thing to make a healthy human. Another thing I wanted to touch on, so much got covered here, but is nutrient density. We talk a lot about that. It's an important thing with our food, right? Not only do we not want municipal tap water in our beef, but we do want a lot of nutrients. And, although on a macronutrient level, feedlot beef and grass-fed beef might be similar, the reality is that in conventional production systems, feed is produced, corn, cotton, which cotton's a textile, and it's fed to cattle. So is commercial chicken crap fed to cattle. Google it. These things are grown using a lot of chemical inputs. Herbicides, glyphosate, for example, I believe it's glyphosate, ties up metals in the soil and makes them unavailable to the plants to absorb them. So when cattle are eating those plants, they're eating a less nutrient-dense food, and they themselves are less nutrient-dense. We're eating food to get nutrition. That's at the core of all this, right? That's why we eat. It's medicine. It's the stuff we need. It's the fuel we need. And you can either have crap or you can have high-quality, high-density input. And so if you care about your body, it makes a lot of sense to kind of take a look at what choices you're making when it comes to food. So.
Beautifully said. So I want to circle back to something that has already been talked about a little bit on the panel, which is distribution and actually giving you guys market access. That was something that Anthony said, access. How do we connect with our farmer? How do we go out and actually shake our farmer's hand? Because it seems like there's a lot of information out there. People want to be making the right decisions, whether it's going to the farmer's market or going to local pastures here in Austin and going to the brick and mortar setup. But how do people actually start to make those changes and make those choices to start shopping locally, start shopping regeneratively?
So we actually are American grass-fed certified. And if you go to their website, they have an interactive map. You can say, I live in North Carolina in this area, and they will give you a list of all the farmers that are certified by them in that area. Also, eatwild.com has a very similar interactive map. When we work events like this, people always ask, will you ship? And we reluctantly say yes, but we're far more like Anthony. That's why when he contacted us about partnership, we were like, heck yes, we want to help you with Austin, because in Texas is local. Everything in Texas is considered local. But I will ship to North Carolina. I will ship to New York, Miami, California. But before I ship, I really try to help people find someone there, because there are people just like us that don't have market access, that haven't been invited to a KetoCon conference or haven't had the opportunity to speak at various things, or just have a great social media daughter that does all of our social media. There's farmers out there that need customers that are looking for y'all to find them. So don't give up that hope first. Use every resource. Go down to the FSA office and ask them, is there someone that's practicing? They might laugh at you because they don't like regenerative farmers, but they'll know of them, and they will refer you to them. So I agree with Anthony. You've got to bring it back home. This model needs to be replicated. It doesn't need to be expounded. Holy cow beef doesn't need to get very much bigger. We're very content with the size we are. But if you need me to, I'll ship. Did you want to?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and I think, obviously the low-hanging fruit is to go to your farmer's market. Social media is a great tool for discovering people in your area. We get people that reach out to us that are traveling abroad and they don't want to eat, grocery store beef, and they'll find our Instagram or something like that, and so that's key. And I support the idea of producing providing your products to your local community. I think Anthony's right. I think the way regenerative scales is not by making regenerative farms bigger; it's by there being more regenerative farms. And I think a part of why I like being a part of these conversations is because I want people's minds to open up to the idea that you can go into doing this and make a living. And the more people that realize that, the more people there will be doing it. And, they say, someone once said the amount of time or the amount of work there is expands to fill the amount of time allocated for it. And I think the same would happen with supply and demand on regeneratively produced meat and products. So that's critical. One of the biggest challenges that we as farmers face, and at least this has been my experience, is to get the product to the consumer and to make make it easy for people to transact with us. We're 90 miles away from Austin. Very few people want to drive 90 miles to come to my farm. Thankfully, a small sliver of the population want to get up on Saturday morning and go to the farmer's market. And then there are people that can afford to pay to have stuff shipped to them, and we do ship. But bridging that gap is tough. And so, there are distributors in place that are there to help. We did open our own retail store in Austin called Local Pastures to help us do that, and we teamed up with Bellevue Farm to do that. So I don't know. I mean, that's been our approach, but But, I think where there's a will, there's a way. And if people are looking, you're going to find it.
Well said. Weldon, before you give that last answer, we have just about 20 minutes left. So as we round out this last question, if there's anyone in the audience that has Q&A for these incredible panelists, if you have any questions you want to ask them, feel free to just line up on that mic, and then we'll answer as many questions as we can. But sorry about that. Go ahead.
My last answer only takes about 2 minutes. For all you egg eaters, we always have gotten used to looking at the color of our yolk to know whether it was a pasture, fed and raised chicken. But beware, the Tysons of the world actually learned a dubious way of tricking you in that. They now feed the Tysons, the Pilgrims, feed their chickens Marigold. It turns the yolk orange, but it doesn't change the nutritional content. So that's why you need to shake your farmer or rancher's hand so you know how your food is being raised, because they're going to deceive you any way they can. I mean, Dairy Queen doesn't have any dairy in it. Warren Buffett owns Dairy Queen. He likes Bill Gates, so you know the road he's going down. And then the last thing is, for every grass-fed pound of meat that y'all eat going forward, you need to know that you have helped sequester 3.5 pounds of carbon dioxide. That when animals are on pasture, not in the feedlot, but on pasture, 1 pound of grass-fed meat equals 3.5 pounds of CO2.
I just want to touch on real quick, the marigold conversation is really relevant, and I want to say that we do blend marigold and paprika into our layer ration. I don't see it as a sleight of hand necessarily. It definitely enhances the yolk color, but I want to clarify that, because that's a big topic of discussion for us with our eggs. And we're very quick to point out to people that our egg yolk is orange because of the level of carotenoids in their feed ration, but the overall quality of the egg is definitely better because it's raised on pasture. So it's actually very commonplace in many parts of the world to do that.
Awesome.
And the one last thing, as we're watching the time here, as you talk about replicating regenerative farming, that also will help the environment because of the carbon. So if you can get all these farmers and ranchers to become regenerative across the country, you will reduce the carbon. So there you go.
Well said. Awesome. All right, so we're going to get into some questions now. So just let us know your name, where you're from, and then we can get right into it.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Steve Goldstein, Austin, Texas. 2 quick questions. One, so can we not trust at Whole Foods that the grass-fed, grass-finished beef is good grass-finished beef? And secondly, what are your opinions on the Savory Institute's work?
He just teed you up big time.
So I'll answer the first part. First of all, I'm a big fan of Savory, but I'll let someone else answer that. So for Whole Foods, if it says it's grass-fed and grass-finished, it is. So you can, anytime you'll see that American Grass-Fed Association stamp on anyone's label, then it's legitimately grass-finished. They do come out to our ranches. They test not only our soil and look at anything, our salt licks. We can't have certain things in our salt licks, which is a mistake a lot of smaller ranchers will make if they're not certified. But yes, at Whole Foods, there's 2 different certifications: American Grass-Fed Association, which guarantees that they're grass-finished, and then there's Global Animal Partnership, which guarantees how the animals are treated, animal welfare. So yes, you can trust that. And you'll find, like Thousand Hills and Natural Grocers, they too are a grass-finished program. There's even every once in a blue moon, you'll find that stamp in Costco. So it's not that they're not out there, it's just that the majority, if it's not certified or you can't trace the roots, then 90% of the time it's going to be finished on grain.
If it says grass-fed on the package,
I'm sorry.
if it says grass-fed on the package but doesn't have a certification, I believe that 99% of the time that will be finished on grain. If you're dealing with your small farmer, he doesn't have to put grass-fed on there. He's going to tell you what his protocol is, and you'll have faith in him.
Anyone want to talk about Savory?
I'll talk about it. I mean, so desertification is a real threat globally, and there's this bad rap that animals get for overgrazing. I think we talked about reclaiming land that had been overgrazed and then fed with glyphosate and all these other chemicals. Well, if we want to remain on this planet, like, we need there to be a living root on most of it. It can't just be endless parking lots in suburbia. You know, they're talking about scaling up, and they don't want to get any bigger. So that means that it needs to be a distributive system. So it means you all need to become regenerative ranchers. So, and we need that. The world needs that. Your health needs that. And as things get tumultuous, you know, we need more resilient food systems. They're not so fragile. They're hyper efficient, bad for you, and hyper fragile. The power goes out in one of these multi-million-dollar facilities. It's food for miles, hundreds and hundreds of miles that isn't going to be made. It's like, but any one of these ranchers might have a backup plan. That, you know, it might be storming in so-and-so's ranch, but not in someone else's. They can be neighbors. They can go help out. It makes us more resilient as a species. Not only does it sequester carbon, it invigorates the neighborhood, the environment, the planet, our health, our bodies, our souls, and our minds. And I think it's crucial to human survival and flourishing.
So savory good.
Savory's
Yes.
good. Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
Oh, wait.
So next question.
Dr. Hone from Midland, and for Weldon, in a nutshell, tell us your regenerative farming recovery from the severity of your stroke to what you have now.
You want me to talk about the farm or my health?
Both, how it influenced it.
Well, thankfully, we did not follow the doctor's advice. He's prescribed 4, I don't even know what they were,
Some were statins.
statins and Coumadin as a blood thinner. But when he said food had nothing to do with your health, I said, and I need a new cardiologist. And we've had 2 subsequent scans where I got to see what I looked like in 2001, and then I got to look at the vascular system in 2006 and again in 2011. And the best description is that most of that plaque was gone.
Wow.
But my doctor said we can't dissolve plaque, and food isn't, you know, you're not eating food for nutrition. But we knew that, you know, God's plan, if I ate too many omega-6 types foods, it would clog the arteries. By eating high density omega-3s and a much healthier lifestyle, the body took care of that and it dissolved the plaque. The blood pressure came down. I never was on the medications. I might die tomorrow, but that'll be God's will. It won't be the doctor. So,
So you literally proved your doctor wrong.
I'm sorry?
You literally proved your doctor wrong when he told you in 2001.
Yes.
Wow.
Did. And I got a new cardiologist.
Awesome.
Hi, my name is Evan. I live here in Austin. And this is an issue that was, I guess, initially brought to my attention by Nina Teicholz, but there's large, portions of the population that either live in or they're part of some sort of institutionalized environment like a prison or a school or a military or hospitals. I feel like those are the main ones. And all those organizations, they have, guidelines they have to abide by for the most part. And I remember a comment earlier that like regenerative farming shouldn't be scaled. And I mean, I get that it would be difficult to, and that's the whole reason the feedlots exist, because it is scalable and industrialized. But I mean, for all of those kind of environments, what kind of solution is there for these organizations that do rely on efficiency, but in order to support the health of people that are part of that?
So there's anyone in Texas knows Texas history. There's a ranch called 4 Sixes. Wonderful history about why it got that name and all of that. It's in a fairly small town. The school system, the superintendent contacted us one day and said, "Hey, I've been given permission to not have to follow the guidelines, and I'm looking to change the school's lunch program and make it grass-finished beef." We said, "You've got 4 Sixes right there. Get them to do it," which they did. 4 Sixes stepped up, and they raised grass-finished beef for that school system. The U.S. government allowed them 2 years to run this program. They brought in fresh vegetables, organically raised, all grown there in their town, in their local rooted area. They had their attendance skyrocketed. They had almost zero sick days, and all of their tests went far up off the charts. And on the third year, the government said, okay, you did what you needed to do, and then instilled their power back. And now they don't have that program. It makes me ill. And so, yes, when you're talking about prisons, heck yes, get those guys out there to start raising their own food and managing cattle within land around the prison system. Most of the big prison systems have a lot of land, extra land around them. Put it to use.
Yeah, and another model for regenerative farming that's been very good for this system, which is a huge need, is the aggregation model. And so there's a lot of farms that will then partner with much smaller farms or brands. Force of Nature is one here. White Oak even does this. Carmen Ranch and Cream Co. is a distributor on the West Coast. And an interesting story about Cream Co. So they buy from a lot of different small operators, small farms, and then they act as the distribution point as sort of the central hub. They are actually doing a pilot program with a lot of public school programs in California to start rolling out regenerative foods. So this does happen. I think there are some ways to certainly do this. And so love to see regenerative meat in California schools. It's the opposite of what we would expect here in Texas, but yes, you're doing a great job.
Love it.
So I would say from a military perspective, like your chow halls need to be local. Your hospital needs to be local. Like, I'd say it does need to be scaled up. We need bigger programs as a manufacturer. That's my unique perspective here. But I'd say it's 20%. I'd say 80% is the distributive model. So it should be local, because you don't want to be transporting meat halfway across the world, which is a lot of what we do now. It's like meat comes from the other side of the world and it ages on a boat. And it's very unnatural. It's burning diesel to do that. It's very inefficient when you can get higher quality nearby and be improving your own neighborhood. So it's like a double whammy there. You need regenerative agriculture around bases, around institutions, so that you're creating that food at the point of use. And then as a field ration, to toot my own horn, please join me in making your own pemmican. But I think pemmican is a better field ration. Try to make things preservative free that are shelf stable using ancestral traditions. And I think that's the key to reclaiming an ancestral health.
Well said.
So next question.
Hi, my name is Denise, and I'm from Wichita Falls, Texas. I was talking to Ann the other day about the fact that our meat is sent over to China. Most of the meat that you get in the grocery store has been sent to China and then comes back here. And I would like to just make awareness for a lot of people that is happening. So it's really important to buy from your local farmer. But also, I wanted to ask you about the fact that butchering in the United States has become a lost art, and there's a lot of where they're not recertifying butchers and different other things in the United States, and how that affects the regenerative farmer, and how we can best, as the local consumer, help with getting that restored as a art in our country, so that we can stop sending the butchering process to other countries as well.
So processing is probably, and I don't know if you guys feel this way, but it's the hardest part of our business. And I talk to God all the time. Why didn't you give me the grace so I could open my own processing plant, so I could control that part of my business? But he hasn't. And so it is a lost art. And especially when you farm regenerative and ranch regenerative, when COVID hit and all the meat left the grocery stores, all of us got hit pretty hard too. And all of our stock also went out. And so for about a month and a half, 2 months, we put animals down every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks we would bring in a certain number of animals, and they would be gone and sold within those couple days. And then we had empty freezers for 2 weeks. If I could have had my own processing plant, then I had animals on the ground. We aren't governed by like feedlot where this animal's about to die, it's got to get butchered now. We actually have a window. Our animals that we put down are 3 to 5 years old. We've got this beautiful window. We had animals on the ground that could have been in the supply chain and there wouldn't have been a shortage. And I'm pretty sure that's the same for all of us on this panel. And so having more local butchers, another local source is imperative. And we've got to support those local butchers, even if they're not only supplying the highest grass-finished beef. It's just so important that every city in America have a local butcher, if not 2 or 3 or 4. And especially for people like us, like I said, we couldn't get enough animals back on until July. So all our freezers went empty in March, and then every 2 weeks they were empty until July when we were finally able to get more on the schedule. And so, yes, she's brought up a really, really good point. Support your local butcher.
I think we have time for one more question.
Mark Ritz, co-founder, CEO at Carnivore Snacks. I'm really curious to know, how does corn and soy fit into the regenerative system? And also how you guys feel about the aggregation model to support whole carcass utilization.
Well, I just commented on the aggregation model being really great for a lot of reasons. I think it can help brands like yours, Carnivore Bar, et cetera, be able to stay consistent. And I'm sure you have tons of opinions on that as well. The corn and soy is a very interesting thing. For me, coming at it and doing some trials in my farm, which we separated pigs and did a test, corn-free, soy-free, corn and soy. We just sent those out actually to Stefan in his lab to do the testing to see all his nutrition. The question is, that I always have is it possible to have a truly regenerative system at all with pigs and chicken that can be, a commercially viable option? And the corn and soy is generally grown off of the farm. And so, yes, it's way, way better than these feedlot systems. But at the end of the day, we're still having to import a lot of the nutrition, just like we would have to import in massive industrial systems, fertilizer, pesticides, et cetera, to have monocrops go. If we have to import monocrops, that I would say is we were relying on an external system, and who knows what's happening downstream. And it's just such a hard problem to solve. We are also in an industry where we have the commodity $5 Costco chicken. So when you have Amber Oaks and you have Shirt Tail and these guys doing poultry, how the hell do you expect them to be able to compete and have birds raise out over a year, or have pigs raise out over 2 years, 3 years? No one's going to pay $120 for a chicken. No one's going to pay $50 for a pork chop. And to do it this way, you're going to have to switch that, and people have to pay something different. And so that's at least my quick opinion on it. And I'd love you guys to sort of follow up on your point of view.
And this kind of bleeds back to the other question about the institutional production of meat. And right now the agricultural system around corn and soy is extremely efficient, but it's also extremely subsidized. And I think if the consumer would vote with their dollars, as Anthony alluded to, right? There's a lot of farmland out there that really would benefit from raising animals on it. And I think that's part of the key to how we decrease the amount of dependency on external, corn and soy, et cetera. And really that's it. The consumer needs to lobby the government, number one, right? We're growing corn for ethanol. It's a silly conversion process. It's actually net negative, right? And they're heavily subsidized with your tax dollars, the grain, different types of grain, corn, soy, et cetera. So as we educate the consumer, then it would be in the best interest of the rancher, or the farmer rather, to convert that land to produce more nutrient-dense meat over grain. right? And we have a long way to go. But I do think we can feed the world in a regenerative manner. I know, like Joe Rogan questions this all the time, right? Can we scale this? There's a lot of land out there, folks. If you've ever flown from the East Coast to the West Coast, there's a lot of land. It's heavily dependent upon irrigation, et cetera. It's just much more suitable for cattle, ruminants. And then, as was alluded to, right, we can, used to be pigs would go off into the woods and they would be raised in the woods basically by themselves. And then the villagers would, herd them back down and then they would butcher them all at one time. There's plenty of mast out there, lots of tree, nuts and that type of stuff to grow pigs in this manner. So it is possible. We just put our money in the wrong location.
Well, I couldn't think of a better way to close out our session. For anyone here that didn't get to ask a question, our incredible panelists are hanging around all day today. So if you have any other additional questions on food sourcing, regenerative, et cetera, go up, introduce yourselves, ask your questions. You can tell that they're incredibly willing to help. And we just want to thank you all for taking the time to sit through this session. And let's give it up for our incredible panelists.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.